Hi, everybody. Hello, welcome. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for Put These Content Marketing Strategies to Work for Your Nonprofit. This is the second of a three-part webinar series featuring John Haydon and sponsored by our friends at DonorDrive. A few housekeeping items before we get started, and we have a lot to do. First, please, if you could indicate that you can hear me by clicking the green thumbs up in the pulse check that you should be seeing on your screen right now. So please do that. Great, I'm seeing some responses already, so good, you're hearing me. If you are experiencing any difficulties, you can please click on the question mark widget to troubleshoot. Next, let me close the pulse check, we got that. Next, today's presentation is being recorded, and it will be emailed. We will email the recording to you. Everyone who's registered, you'll get that later today. And also, we're leaving time for Q&A at the end of our presentation, so please feel free to submit any questions you have for John or Joanna via the Q&A widget on your screen. In today's event, we're going to learn about some strategies and hacks to help us better share our nonprofit stories in a way that will really engage our community stakeholders and donors, as well as help us recruit more of those. Specifically, we'll learn how to craft engaging content, improve the storytelling skills, build a cohesive strategy, make content do the heavy lifting for our organizations, and develop content that our fundraisers can share in peer-to-peer campaigns. Our very special guest today is John Haydon, fundraising and digital marketing expert. He is the author of Facebook Marketing for Dummies and Facebook Marketing All-in-One. And he's also a sought-after speaker. He's presented at NTEN's annual Nonprofit Technology Conference. And let's see, he is a regular contributor to Top Nonprofits, Huffington Post, Social Media Examiner, and NP Engage. Welcome, John. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Amy. It is so great to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. John, we're really interested in getting a chance to learn more about how we can improve our fundraising game by incorporating a solid content marketing strategy. So I know you have a lot to share with us. Why don't I just let you get started?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the intro, too. That was very kind. So welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about specific things you can do to improve your content marketing. And I will pretty much hold until the end for Q&A. And we're going to jump right in. Before we start, though, I do encourage you to take out a piece of paper and a pen, jot down notes and some action items for yourself to do after this webinar, because I want you to actually put this stuff into action. It doesn't really work unless you do it, unfortunately. It's not magic that we're producing here. So the agenda today is as follows. We're going to answer the question, what do you want your content to do? We're going to talk about developing a smarter plan, a smarter content marketing plan. We're going to talk about discovering content that you already have on your laptop and in the field. And we'll also talk about automating content curation with a few cloud-based apps, and how to create stellar visual content for your website, social media, and email. And we're going to touch on a few other topics as well. So we're going to jump right in again. The first topic is, or the first question is, what do you want your content to do? Now, content marketing is kind of a buzzword that we've seen a lot, or we've heard a lot lately. And it's really important to be specific with your goals, not just putting stuff out there. Posting anything on Facebook and anything on Twitter is not content marketing. We have to be very specific. Common goals for most nonprofits, they have goals around engaging the community, retaining donors, developing brand awareness, acquiring new donors, and also establishing themselves as a thought leader. And we have a screenshot here from some research that the Nonprofit Marketing Guide has conducted, my friend Kivi. And she is talking about the most important communication goals, and those line up with what I'm describing here, okay? So let's drill into these goals just a little bit. Okay, I'm not going to touch on all the goals, but a couple very important ones: retaining donors and volunteers. If you're like the average nonprofit, your retention rates are, struggling. okay? In other words, you're losing more donors than you are attracting. And so content marketing and telling your story in a really powerful way across social media and on your website, this actually does influence donor retention. One study reported that 53% of online donors report that achieving and communicating measurable results is prominent in their decision-making to donate again. It's kind of one of these obvious points here, right? But we all know this, and content marketing is really a way to reinforce this. Yes, thank you so much for your support. Yes, you're making a difference, okay? Another goal is to attract new donors. So we can actually create content that is going to be shared, of course, on Facebook and social media. And when we do that, especially with Facebook, we are creating opportunities for our supporters to talk to their friends about us. Now, this really gets into what you could call word-of-mouth marketing, the oldest form of marketing on the planet. And so when we can tell a story very quickly that's shareable and really interesting, and most importantly, make sure supporters look really cool to their friends, there we are attracting new donors. We're also creating brand awareness and so forth. But attracting new donors is really critical to making, really a critical goal, I guess, in content marketing. We also have, the third one is, well, actually, I'm kind of outlining each one of these in terms of how you would measure these goals. All goals, by the way, they should be broken down into objectives. So engaging our community, yes, that's a great goal, but how do we measure it? How can we be really specific? And of course, we can measure social engagement, visits to our website, conversions, meaning when someone signs up as a volunteer or joins our email list or signs up as a donor. Retaining donors and volunteers, we can obviously look at email and social engagement as well as conversions and increased retention rates over time. So all of these things can be measured. Brand awareness is a little bit more of these soft kind of things that might be difficult to measure, but you can measure it in terms of reach, following, search rankings, and there's also some metrics out there about sentiment, how people feel about your brand. Attracting new donors, of course, that's going to be conversions, email engagement, social media engagement, thought leadership, search rankings, retweets, shares, mentions, and links back to your website, of course. So all of these can be measured. That's the point, is to start off knowing, like, we really have to measure this. It's not just some magical formula we're going to wave, and suddenly, this stuff starts happening. If we measure, then we know honestly where we're at, and we know how we can improve. So let's talk about that plan. Once we establish our goals, and we're really specific about our objectives, I'm going to point out now a couple of things to develop a smarter content marketing plan. And I've worked with hundreds of nonprofits, actually. So basically what I'm going to show you is the low-hanging fruit. I like to call myself the low-hanging fruit guy. But first, let's get this out of the way in terms of what effective content is. Effective content really creates value for your supporters. It's useful, it's practical, it's contextual and relevant, meaning that it's relevant in terms of a trending topic or something that's in the news, timely. It's easy to consume. People can see it and they can react to it quickly. They can share it very quickly. It's device agnostic, meaning that your content should be able to be distributed and shared across any sort of platform, laptop, tablet, iPhone, and so forth. So it should be device agnostic. Findable, meaning people are going to find it in search. It's non-intrusive, meaning that it's not so much an interruption, but it's something that's going to enhance and add value to your supporters' lives. It's engaging, of course. It's unique, kind of sets your organization apart from all of the other similar nonprofits. You can do that very easily with content marketing. And then it builds trust and authority over time. The main thing about trust, I know trust is kind of a word that we say, well, trust, how can you measure it and how can you actually have any impact on that? One of the most important things and one of the lost opportunities I see a lot of nonprofits making is that there's a lack of consistency. So they'll start a Facebook page, they'll throw a couple of posts out there, and then they'll fall asleep at the wheel, and then, oh, geez, we forgot. So there's this inconsistency, and that actually hurts trust. You know, are these guys still around? What's up with them? There's some doubt. We do not want doubt in a potential supporter's mind, so definitely consistency is key. So how to develop this smarter plan? Now, these are things you can do right away, okay? The first is to make your content trackable so that you can actually see and report up to your boss and your boss's boss, what is the ROI? What's the effect? Is this investment really working? Should we continue to make this investment? Number two, listen to what your people care about. And this is something that is new-ish in marketing. In the days of Mad Men, of course, we could do a focus group and come up with a cool tagline and an ad, throw it out there, and we would make some sales or get donors. But now the issue is people can actually talk about us with their friends and with the world. So we really have to understand, where are people at? How do people feel about these issues? And most importantly, what's really important to them? What are they thinking about? What's on their mind? Number three, use an editorial calendar. Number four, planning repurposing. So the issue today, as with most brands and nonprofits, is that now it's no longer about the coffee mug or the annual report and the tagline. Nonprofits and brands and any business nonprofit is really kind of a media outlet. We have to publish and put content out there every single day. So this is very difficult. So repurposing is one way to kind of make things a little bit more efficient. And then creating a marketing bank with Google Docs or Dropbox. So I'm going to get into each one of these. The first one is to make your content trackable with UTM tags. Now, what are UTM tags? These are the little tags that we see at the end of a URL. If you click on a link in Twitter or Facebook or anything like that, you'll notice that there's the main URL, but then there's a question mark and there's a whole bunch of stuff after that question mark, and I'll show you an example in a second. But the reason why we want to do this is because we're going to get better Google Analytics reporting. Some of the content that we publish will be on our website. You know, for example, an infographic that sits on our website, a blog post about an impact story that's so powerful, that will sit on our website, a video embedded on our website. This is all content. So we want to make sure that when people go to our website and they share it, we can actually track that back and see what's happening in Google Analytics. And of course, when we share that on social media, which we should continuously, we can always report back and say, most of our results are coming from Facebook. So yes, let's in fact invest a little bit more, maybe Facebook ads and so forth. Snapchat, you know, that's great. It's not driving traffic, but maybe we have other goals for that. Okay, just as an example, we can really decide which channels are working well, which channels are driving the most traffic. And then we can see which campaigns are engaging and converting. So part of the UTM tagging allows you to identify a campaign. So for example, a giving day, perfect example. We want to know, you know, which channel or which effort within that campaign is driving the most traffic or driving the most conversions. Once we tag those, we can go into Google Analytics, and the data just makes so much more sense, okay? So what are these UTM tags? So first of all, most social media tools like Hootsuite and Buffer, Sprout Social, they all have this ability to add UTM tags in your URL. There's a YouTube video, because we don't have too much time to get into it, but there's a whole Google Analytics channel, of course, on YouTube, and you know, Google owns YouTube. So they have a very incredible channel of videos all about learning Google Analytics. There's a link here specifically about UTM tags, you know, collecting campaign data and using these UTM tags. So you can get here, you can start with that. But that's the first thing, is to start thinking about when you share content from your website on social media and on Twitter, if you want to really measure it better, tag it, put UTM tags on it, and then you can start you'll start getting better reporting from Google Analytics, okay? Number two, listen to what your people care about. I say this is job one of a marketer, of a nonprofit communicator. This is job one. We should always be listening. It's not like we listen and then say, okay, great, we understand what people want for the next year. No, you always have to listen every single day. And the reason why is because things change so rapidly. And not only that, but we have this opportunity now. In the days of Mad Men, I'm sure many of you are Mad Men fans. I love the show Mad Men. But in the days of Mad Men, marketers really had to rely on, kind of reports from Nielsen ratings. Here's how many people are watching TV. And, a lot of that stuff was kind of made up out of thin air. So it wasn't terribly accurate at that point. But now we can see exactly what messages are working and what messages aren't. So we have our ears to the ground all the time. My favorite tool is Facebook Insights, simply because most nonprofits have a Facebook page. This is an incredible opportunity for you to consistently publish content and test out, and I'm underlining and stressing this word test out different ideas, different topics, pushing the barriers on your content and see, what's going to get people talking. How can we really start more meaningful conversations? And within Insights, we can go to our posts report and look at we can look at high engagement rate. So actually in the engagement column, we can look at engagement rate. Engagement rate, of course, is the percent of people that saw your post that reacted to it. So if you publish let's say a photo on Facebook, 1,000 people see it, but and 100 people clicked on it, liked it, commented on it, shared it, viewed the video, whatever it might be. That's obviously a 10% engagement rate, and that's actually fairly good for Facebook. Best tweets. This is another thing that's available. So if you have a Twitter account, automatically you have analytics built in. You can see them in the browser fairly quickly if you go under the settings area on your Twitter account, and it will show you ads. You just go to the ads module, and you'll see analytics in there. You can use it for free. You don't have to buy an ad. But you want to focus on, again, the top tweets. Which tweets are getting the most retweets? Which tweets are getting the most clicks to our website? Those are two very important metrics. One is talking about engagement and spreading awareness, and the other is talking about traffic to your website, okay? The best tweets. Another place where we can do a lot of listening and understanding our community is by looking at hashtags. Especially if we have a large follower base that uses Instagram, all right, or Twitter. And we can simply type in any keyword we want related to our cause, obviously. So in this case, we're looking at diabetes, and we can find the top 10 hashtags related to diabetes, any other keywords and mentions, and we can also research trending topics through this tool as well. And there are many other tools we can use to research trending topics. But hashtags is definitely one way to do it. And you can start to see how people are talking about diabetes. So we have type 2, TID. There's this big Spanish-speaking community in diabetes, and we have the hashtag health. So of course, people with diabetes, they're interested in issues of health and topics around health. So that might be kind of a lateral topic that we can dip our toe in around health, healthy eating, healthy foods, exercise, and so forth. So that all relates back to diabetes. Again, it's about understanding what our community is talking about. We can also search Twitter. So I have a cattle dog, an Australian cattle dog. His name is Otis. He's my best friend in the world. And I can go onto Twitter and I can look at any animal shelter that's talking about, not an animal shelter, but anybody who's mentioning animal shelter and cattle dog in the same mention on Twitter. We can look at location. We can look at sentiment even. Is this a negative, positive? Do people have questions? So if, again, going back to diabetes, a diabetes organization can do research in here and see, well, let's look at all the diabetes questions on Twitter. Hopefully, you can answer many of those questions, and that, I would say, is going to be very useful, especially if they are very popular questions, okay? Google Analytics. Again, a lot of nonprofits I work with, they're a little afraid of Google Analytics, but honestly speaking, if you just dip your toe in, you start looking at some of these reports, you're going to find a lot of value in them. One of my favorites is to look at the social, what's called user flow on our website. I'm a very visual person. So we can actually look at under acquisition, social, users flow, we can look at what pages are people viewing when they come to our website. Okay, great, they go to this page, but what happens next? What's the most popular page that they go to next? And not only that, one of the most valuable aspects of this user's flow report is you can quickly identify where you are losing people if there's a drop-off. So in other words, people visit a page, and let's say only 10% of those people click through to the next page, and 90% of those people bail, they just leave the website. That is a huge opportunity there to go to that page and update it in some way that encourages people to seek more on the website, you know. So if you ever have a web page on your website and you see a huge drop-off, meaning that lots of people are leaving your site, once they reach that website, that I would rank as a priority. You know, go to that page, look at the context, and find out how can we tell people what's next, or what is the logical next thing that people might be interested in exploring, and let's make sure that that's on that page so that they don't just jump off, all right? Or maybe it's an email newsletter. We can just ask them to join our email newsletter, and that might be a great opportunity. Use surveys. Some clients I work with, they say, surveys, people still use surveys? Yes, survey. The more you survey your donors and volunteers, which are your best people, by the way, you want, in other words, if we want to understand anybody, if we only have one audience to understand and really dedicate ourselves to, it's going to be people that already donate or volunteer. We want to really understand what makes them tick. Where do they come from? Where do they hang out? How can we be useful? What do their friends want to hear, from us, right? And how can we serve them? And so the more you survey your donors at strategic moments, the better off you're going to be. You're going to be in a much better position. An easy way to get started with this is with an open comment form on your thank you page. So if someone makes a donation, you say, thank you so much. You just made a big difference in someone's life. By the way, what made you decide to give today? Just a quick sentence. Keep it an open text box. And then over time, you can start to see similarities, and then maybe you can update that page to have multiple choice, so it's easier to report on, okay? So definitely surveys, for sure. Next topic, using an editorial calendar. So again, I mentioned a few minutes ago that nonprofits are now media establishments, essentially. We are publishing lots of content. We're either creating it or we are curating it. In order to have this all make sense, it's good to have a calendar. And the benefit of a calendar is that it gives us a bird's eye view of our planning. We can see 30 days out. We can also, well, 30 days and more, we can also avoid any potential communication conflicts, which, believe it or not, are pretty common. I'm sure you've had this experience where you send out that big email blast to ask people to register for an event, but you find out that the department next door, oh geez, they just sent that other email to the volunteers asking them to volunteer, for that event. So now you're asking people two things. The actions are diluted. They're basically cannibalizing each other. So those type of conflicts you can avoid with an editorial calendar. Now, how do we use an editorial calendar? I'm going to walk you through the basic steps to use an editorial calendar. By the way, in terms of tools, if you don't have an editorial calendar now, you can start in one of two ways. One is you use Google Calendar. It's free. You can create a private one and only invite, a few key communication folks, fundraising, volunteer department, marketing, communications, and so forth. So you're all on the same page. That's really the goal with this, is everybody in the organization is speaking the same language, telling the same stories at the same time. We want to start off in our calendar The other tool we can use is, of course, Excel, an Excel spreadsheet. And we can, organize weeks after weeks, topics, channels, and so forth. So, but we want to start by adding our cause-related dates. These are external dates. So, for example, if you're a Christian kind of centered organization, you better have Good Friday on your calendar. If you're Jewish, of course, Passover. Don't mess with Passover. And so you want to have this on the calendar so that you're not unknowingly publishing, say, an email during Passover that no one is going to read. That's not going to be a good thing. So relevant religious holidays, important dates to the community. If you're an African-American nonprofit, of course, Martin Luther King Day, yes, do not forget that. And the next step is you want to look at your internal dates. So what are the major events or initiatives that we have going on over the next 3 months? We want to put these into our calendar. Volunteer events, organizational events, fundraising events, and so forth. And now we have something to work towards. So in other words, let's say, in this example, we have a walkathon at the end of this month. So now we can think, okay, great, 30 days before, we want to start planting the seed and also encouraging people to take action, register, and so forth. So maybe first week can be behind the scenes towards the walkathon, teasers, stories, related topics. There can be an early registration incentive. Certainly, if you have an annual event every year, like a walkathon or a big annual fundraising gala, the best people to go after first is the people that came to the event last year. I mean, again, low-hanging fruit. Get those people in the door, get them telling their friends about that event, okay? And then the week, middle week here, we can have registration promotions, information about sponsors, really incredible emotional stories of impact that might be featured at that event or talked about that event. We can talk about early registration results, recognition of volunteers and donors, stories behind the registrants and the fundraisers. So for example, peer-to-peer fundraising. We can start featuring, well, we have, let's say 50 to 100 peer-to-peer fundraisers. Which ones are actually raising the most money? What's their story? Let's get these folks to really tell their story a little bit more. Let's distribute that on all of our social channels. So this is great, really giving them a voice and also recognizing them and appreciating them, right? And then, of course, inviting core supporters to share stories. And so you get the idea. Basically planning the communication, promotions, I guess you can call them promotions, or another way to look at it is excuses to talk about the event, right? I work with an organization, and every year they have actually a silent auction. It's a great event, lots of fun, but there's a silent auction aspect to it. And so one thing that we do every year is let's find the most wacky item that's in the silent auction, right? The lava lamp. Yes, take a picture of the lava lamp, put it on Instagram. That will get lots of people engaged, and it's an excuse to talk about your upcoming event, okay? And then you're going to add also action calls, basically, calls to action in your calendar. So register early to win, there's a giveaway, and then, of course, always last chance to register, last chance to sign up, okay? So that's our calendar. The next step, so these are all things you can do to make a smarter content marketing plan. The next one is repurposing, right? Repurposing. So again, we are in a situation today where every single business and nonprofit has to put content out there. We are essentially kind of publishing houses, okay? Like a newspaper in a sense. So we really have to think about saving time, because we can't just hire tons of people. Maybe obviously we have limitations around that. We should obviously meet the demand with appropriate staff, of course, but that's another discussion. But one way to kind of solve this problem is to really think about things as repurposing. So, and I have two examples here just very quickly, and I'll dive into this a little bit more. But the first one is a blog post. So if your nonprofit has a blog, while you're writing that blog post, keep in mind that that blog post is going to have quotes in it for your tweets, maybe some statistics or pictures from that blog post that will be used and distributed on Facebook, Twitter, and so forth, and also in your email newsletter. So when you put all the effort into writing a blog post, which, take it from me, it takes a lot of work. I've written over 1,500 blog posts on my blog, johnhaydon.com, and each one takes, I would say, 3 to 4 hours of real planning, research, writing, and so forth. But I know that the investment is worth it because now I have fodder, what you can say fodder, to publish on social media. Video is another excellent one. I know several nonprofits that invest in consistent video. Facebook Live, I'm a big fan of Facebook Live. We can take this video, we can easily embed it from Facebook or YouTube into a blog post. We can even transcribe the video. So there's services out there like transcribeme.com, and we can take an audio file, upload it, and then now we get a transcription that we can now use for a blog post. So let me get more specific about that. I have one client, and they do regular Facebook Live videos. Not every week, but maybe every 2 weeks to a month. And every time they have basically a format. We're going to break down our Facebook Live video into 3 sections. It might be a question, or it might be 3 specific questions that we're going to answer. And now, once they finish with that, they can take that video, they can edit it to make 3 videos, one covering each topic, and also they can transcribe each one of those 3 videos, take the audio, transcribe that, and now we have 3 blog posts. In other words, the raw material is there just by virtue of creating and putting in the effort of the blog post or the video or the email newsletter, okay? So again, this makes sense because we have limited time, we have to appeal to a lot of different audiences, and we want to make sure that our message is consistent. So we should have, so for example, the focus should be on the story, not on the posts. In other words, don't think, what are we going to post on social media or what content are we going to share? Rather, think, what story are we going to tell? And then how does that story look on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, right? Ideally, in a perfect world, that story, the bulk of it, or the kind of the epic novel of that story lives on your website. So you can always drive traffic to your website. Hey, here's a cool picture. Find out more about this picture, or hear the whole story here. Here's a link, right? So driving people, giving people a reason to go back to your website. And we can also obviously plan repurposing into our calendar. So beginning with a story idea 30 days in advance, developing an outline for that story, and then deciding what's the best format for that story. Is it a video? Is it a blog post? And like I said before, start with the piece that requires the most resources, the most effort. So in other words, this is kind of a shift. Rather than saying, well, let's put all of our energy into writing a bunch of tweets and Facebook updates and all that stuff. Listen, that takes a lot of time. It's better to actually focus most of your effort and energy and attention on the content that takes the most work, and knowing that a lot of that work is going to give you the Facebook updates, the Twitter updates, and the videos and pictures and so forth, okay? Often during the research project, or during the research process, so that's actually what happens with me, when I write a blog post, I do some research, and I find some really great articles out there. What do I do with them? I just retweet them. I put them on Twitter, I put them on Facebook, on Instagram, on other social channels like LinkedIn, and that's all part of the effort. So it's like one effort of creating that major, epic pillar content that drives everything else. Number 5, creating a marketing bank. So I work with a lot of different nonprofits. Many of them, of course, have people in the field doing programs, operations, and so forth. And so part of the challenge is like, well, let's get some images. Let's get the stories from the field. Let's say they're working in a country in Africa, for example. And I have one client that's working on clean water, like wells, water, and so forth. And they have people in the field. They're program people. And they are able to take pictures, share them, and give them to marketing. But how do we get them? So that's where I always recommend to all my clients, create a marketing bank, create a central place where you can keep everything and where people in the field can share content, post it to, say, Dropbox or Google, and then you can access this. Not only the stories from the field, but also the logo, the bio, the headshot, the about your organization, the bios for each of your executives, and so forth, right? So this information, it's always good to have it in a central place and always know that that's the only place we're going to get the logo, right? Because we don't want to have 5, 10 versions of the logo being emailed around, and now you have to hunt through your email and look for it, okay? So let's talk about this content, right? So some of you are probably saying, wow, this is great. I'm going to be saving some time, but we still have to find out and create these blog posts or email newsletters, and the base part of the content we have to really start working with. My argument would be a lot of the content already lives on your laptop. So I'm going to tell you a quick story and why start from scratch, right? So Betty Crocker, the cake mix, is already in your laptop. So I'm working with an education foundation, and they are working on a series of content educating parents. Now we didn't just suddenly decide that we're going to do that. We discovered that they have all of this material. They do workshops for parents. They do webinars. And so right when I started working with them, they wanted to get into this world of content marketing. I said, wow, you guys are sitting on a mountain of gold, and it exists in the workshops. It exists in the PowerPoint slides. It exists in the PDFs and the guides that you share with parents. It also exists in the frequently asked questions that you constantly reply to by email, right? So maybe there's an FAQ page on your website, or maybe there's a ton of emails that you've sent that are literally copy and paste. We get the same question all the time about picking a good preschool. What's a good preschool? Or, how do I prepare my child for the first day of school? How do they transition from being in, daycare to, or maybe even at home, to suddenly being with other little kids? And, how do we get them to get along? It's not an easy thing. So we want to look at FAQs in your email, stories that are sent in from the field, stories from your annual report, or stories that you're preparing for your annual report. Now, I will say that there's an excellent guide on storytelling. It's an ebook that's attached to this webinar in the extras. Download that. It's a really great resource to help you create a format and a framework for your stories. We're going to talk about stories in just a second, but I just wanted to quickly mention that. So repurposing, here's an example of an FAQ from an organization. They have this on their website, and it's just sitting there. Actually, this example is a PDF. It's a PDF document that they were sending out. So PDFs are great, but they do not help you with content. They do not help you with search. Google has no idea what a PDF is. So it's better to take the content and scrape it off of your PDF material if you have educational, useful material, scraping that off and creating blog posts. So from this one PDF, we're able to create 3 blog posts, 12 Facebook updates, 12 tweets, and in their case, they're using Pinterest, so 6 different pins. And they're answering 3 basic questions. What are the different types? This is a diabetes organization. What are the different types of diabetes? Hey, that's a great question. Who gets diabetes? Now, who gets diabetes? Here's the answer. What causes diabetes? And here's the answer. And so they can take this. It's not a copy and paste, by the way, but they have a really good start. So who gets diabetes? They have a short answer here, and no doubt they have more supportive material that they can add to that blog post. And again, like I said before, now that blog post is basically the home base for the content that lives on their website that now they can always go back to and distribute on social media, okay? Capturing stories from the field. I mentioned using Dropbox. So encourage people in the field to take pictures, give them a little guidance around pictures, and taking videos, upload them to your marketing bank. And now you can get them. It's so much easier to do it this way. Sometimes there is a bandwidth issue, especially if you're dealing with countries in Africa or some remote part of the world. It's a little bit of an issue. It's a slower upload time, but certainly this still works in really everywhere on the planet, essentially. Google Drive, Dropbox, and Box are my favorites for organizing this kind of content. This gets back to that marketing bank idea. So let's let's shift gears a little bit. We talked a lot about creating the content and maybe making that process more efficient, okay? But one of the best ways to save a lot of time with content marketing is to focus on curation, okay? So when I work with a nonprofit, the number one question I get is, how are we going to do it without a huge staff? How can we do it? And I said, well, you're going to be really stressed out, really anxious, and you're probably going to quit your job if you think that you have to be the source of all the information. So I'm working with an ALS organization, and they made this shift about a year ago. They used to think, oh, we have to answer every single question about ALS that everyone has in our community, and of course there are lots of questions. Now what they do is they focus mostly on being not the source, but a resource, right? They want to be the resource. So they find the best content, the most useful content, and they share it. The ratio, and this is not a strict ratio here, but I usually recommend to clients to think about focusing most of their content that they're publishing is really on curated content. So 20% on crafting original content that would live on the website or in your newsletter or video. And then 80% of your posts on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram are really curated pictures, curated content that you found from another source, right? Of course, add your own spin. Don't just say, hey, this is a cool article. Read it, definitely read it, and then say, this is what we think, or pull out the piece of value in that article, like the most valuable thing, and add it as a quote, or just add it to the description in your Facebook update, okay? You can also look at content from pages that your fans like. So going to Facebook and doing a search, this is actually a search using Facebook, pages liked by women who like the Ellie Fund, which is a breast cancer organization. And we could see the most popular Facebook pages that are associated with our fan base. In other words, you can easily find, and I'll make a list right here. We can look at partner organization. We can look at sponsors. We can look at other popular pages that our fans like. And here's an example of 3 different pages that are associated with the Ellie Fund, meaning that these are the most popular pages within the fan base. So chances are the content's going to perform fairly well if it's on message. We're not just going to share any post. We're going to share the top performing posts, and we're going to make sure that it's relevant to our organization, okay? Especially if you're talking about like a retailer, as someone who's sponsoring an upcoming event. If they have a sale, guess what? They want more people to see that sale. So if they publish that sale on Facebook, I would highly recommend sharing that with your fan base and saying, hey, these guys are having a sale. They're awesome. They're one of our favorite sponsors for our upcoming event. Again, another excuse to talk about your upcoming event that's valuable to your supporters. One of my favorite tools is BuzzSumo. So, and this is especially useful for organizations that are super small. So with BuzzSumo, you can actually set up monitoring alerts, kind of like Google alerts, but much deeper. And you can set up an alert. In this case, we have an alert for childhood diabetes, and not just alerts, but we can actually do a lot of research on trending content, and we can instantly find what's the top shared content on social media related to childhood diabetes. We search, and we can rank let me look at the top posts from Facebook, from LinkedIn, from Twitter, Pinterest, Google+, and we can look at total shares. The benefit of this is that you are curating and sharing content that's already been vetted. You don't want to share a piece of content that you found that really isn't getting any traction, right? It's better to find a piece of content that's already getting a lot of traction, that's already getting lots of likes, comments, and shares. That's BuzzSumo. Mention is another one. Mention is similar to Google Analytics or Google Alerts, where you can set up an alert in Mention. It scours social media and blog posts, and also forums. So we can type in and monitor specific alerts. So I'm going to just mention a few things that you should all be monitoring, either with Mention or with Google Alerts. It would be the name of your organization, your top executives, keywords around your organization, i.e. childhood diabetes, the names of any programs or initiatives, any sort of branded keywords, like a walkathon, a walk for hunger, that sort of thing that's associated with your organization. And also, you want to keep tabs on the competition, right? Any mentions of the competition, because you want to have your ear to the ground about them. What are they doing, right? And learn from them, find out how you can differentiate yourself. Here's another tool. It's called Post Planner. So if your organization has a large presence on Facebook and you're looking to make that much more efficient, Post Planner might be your tool. What you can do is you can create folders and actually alerts for the top trending content. And, for example, I'm not looking at these right now, but you can look at, I'll just stay with childhood diabetes. So we want to look at the top Facebook posts that have been published about childhood diabetes. And again, if it's relevant, if it makes sense, of course, we can simply add it to our Post Planner queue, and then will automatically get shared. You can do the same thing with other tools like Buffer, okay? A couple of mobile apps that are some of my favorites. One is Pocket. Pocket is basically a place where you can, if you find something on the web, an article, something really cool, you can just add it to your Pocket feed, and then you can go back and share that automatically. Flipboard, Reader, Mention is another one. These are all mobile apps. Downcast is a podcast tool that I use, so there might be relevant podcasts around your cause. And if you're a podcast person, if you like listening to podcasts while you work out at the gym, you'll get inspiration. Wow, that's a great idea. Maybe we should explore that idea a little bit more with our content. All right? Pages Manager. By the way, I'm going to say to everyone, if you're not using Pages Manager, you're going to love me by the time you find out about it and start using it. A lot of organizations I work with, I find out that they're actually using the Facebook app on their mobile phone to manage their Facebook page. That's a big mistake, because you can unknowingly publish something on your own Facebook news feed and with your friends and all that. So the Pages Manager app, it's in iOS and Google, and it's specifically made by Facebook to help marketers manage multiple Facebook pages. You can even look at insights. You can take a quick glance and look at, here's our week so far. You can publish content. You can capture an idea and save it as a draft post right on your iPhone or your Android. It's a massive time saver, especially if you use your iPhone a lot, if you use an Android a lot. You find yourself kind of using that to manage a lot of stuff. Use the Pages Manager app. And then there's also Hootsuite. Hootsuite is great to manage Twitter, multiple Twitter streams, Twitter lists, and have Twitter searches going on. So you can keep track on those top mentions that I mentioned earlier. So let's talk about the visual content for your website, social media, and email. The first thing, so very quickly, we're going to research top performing pictures, develop our stories, and create snippets and make sure that it's shareable. So in terms of researching our top performing pitchers, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we already did address this. You want to go to your social platforms, in this case it's Pinterest or Facebook, and you want to always rank your posts by engagement rate or pure engagement and ask yourself, you know, what is it about this picture? You know, start exploring that a little bit more. But not only that, you can obviously reshare this picture and use it in other ways. Often what I do is I'll post an image or a topic or a picture on Facebook or Twitter, and if it's getting lots of retweets or lots of likes, comments, and shares, that tells me, maybe this could be a topic for a blog post that I should expand upon. So I'm always taking the cue from social media. Now, developing your stories. The first thing I'm going to say is that storytelling is basically the foundation of any sort of successful content marketing strategy. I'm going to mention that ebook again. It's a great resource, actually. Has pretty much, I would say, everything you need to know about storytelling all in one ebook, and it's free, and you can download it right in the resources. So one thing about storytelling that we have to kind of get out of the way is that storytelling is not statistics, news, milestones. It's not bragging about your organization, and it's certainly not educating your donors. And I'm using air quotes when I say educate because I hear that often. We just have to educate our supporters. If they were only educated, then, wow, we would raise so much money. No, they come to find out that actually people were done with being educated when they left school. So that doesn't really work so well. Rather, effective storytelling is visual, it's emotional, it's immediately relatable, it's actionable, it's shareable, and it's personal. It's deeply personal. Now, some of you might feel, wow, you know, I'm not Steven Spielberg. Tell me, John, how I can make this a little bit easier. There's a framework for telling stories that is as old as stories themselves, which is as old, by the way, as human beings. So we're talking a couple 100,000 years, I want to say. And there's really three main elements. The first is the hook, or what I call the person, right? So always story, the first thing, the first element in any story is to introduce the protagonist, right? The protagonist has to really touch someone. They have to be immediately relatable. They have to be, when I say relatable, they have to communicate, I'm just like that person. That person shares my values. That person's just like me in some ways, right? So you don't want to just say, here's a cute kid. You want to say, here's a cute kid who wants to become an astronaut. That's relatable, all right? It triggers an emotion instantly. Again, as a species, we are hardwired deeply in our middle brain to react to people emotionally. See a face, we want to connect, right? The hold would be the next part, or what I call the problem. So when you introduce a person, you know, let's say this little kid, he's so cute, right? Not enough. Max, this cute kid, he has aspirations of being an astronaut one day. But there's a problem. Max can't focus in class because he doesn't have enough to eat. This is the problem. It basically presents what you call plot questions. It introduces the protagonist's goals. Max wants to be an astronaut. And so this presents an obstacle, a problem. Now, with nonprofits, always like to tell good news. Good news is great, however, but you can't really raise too much money if you always tell good news. You always have to tell people that there is a problem. And what happens when you present a problem to supporters? They will want to solve that problem, and that is what the payoff is. When you present a story correctly, you're presenting a protagonist, grabs the emotions. This cute little kid, Max, has a problem. You can make a difference in Max's life. It's that call to action. Now, it may not be donating. It may be something else, like click here and read more about Max, or share this story with your friends, you know, that sort of thing, okay? So that's the underlying thing behind all visual stories, any real stories, the storytelling. And I'm just going to point out this guide, again, that comes with this webinar, okay? So once you start crafting your stories, and actually I will tell you that I've worked with a lot of, again, I've said it before, hundreds of nonprofits. The most common thing I've seen is that they're not telling effective stories. Once we start to figure out what that story is, a lot of the results start happening. Honestly, this is the underpinning for success. Now, I mentioned it before. we have to publish lots of content. One tool that I love, and I'm sure many of you guys love this tool, is Canva. Canva is relatively free, and you can create any visual content that you need. Social media headers, Instagram pictures, Facebook updates, Twitter pictures, Pinterest, and, you name it. You can create it with Canva very quickly because they have beautiful templates that you can start with. So instantly, with a couple of mouse clicks, you're basically 80% to having a great piece of content that you can now use for social media, okay? Pablo is another great tool for quickly creating visual content, and both of these, again, you can use your own pictures, you can dress them up, you can add your logo, put words on them, and so forth. So check out these resources. They are massive time savers. The last thing you want to do is you want to make it shareable, right? Now, the problem with making something shareable, of course, social media right away, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, a lot of that stuff has these features in it. Share this with your friends, retweet this, and so forth. So I'm not talking about that so much. I'm talking about the way you're presenting it, to ask people to share. If we just command people to share, we're not going to be satisfied. We're not going to get a great result. There's the best way to ask people to share is to make that connection with the cause. So, for example, this picture, which interestingly enough is a picture of words, it says breast cancer is, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but for a survivor, it's every single day. Share this update if you know someone impacted by breast cancer. It's a two-letter word that really makes a difference, and it's if. What this does, this ties this issue to the person. And the person who sees this, their goal, just like everyone's goal, by the way, using social media, their goal is to make a certain impression on their friends, right? So the person that shares this, what they're saying is, yes, I care about fighting breast cancer, and it's important to me that you know that. That's what they're saying with everything that they share. That second part of it is really critical, and we can tap into that by asking them to share, okay? So that is it. I'm going to pass it back to Amy, and I'm sure there are lots of different questions, and thank you all so much again.
Well, actually, thanks, John. As a matter of fact, what I wanted to do while John gets some water and hydrates for a little bit, because that was a lot of information, I'm going to give everybody a chance to submit their questions. And I'd also like to ask our friend Joanna Harvey here from DonorDrive to introduce herself.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks, John, for sharing the tips and expertise. I really, most relevant to me was the advice on how to develop stories and create visuals for social media. At DonorDrive, we work a lot with our clients in the peer-to-peer fundraising space on their programs, and we see firsthand how crucial storytelling is, especially in social media. So to further that, we've created this fabulous ebook, our storytelling ebook, and we've included a link here for you. Welcome all of you to hit that link. It'll take you to a registration page where you can download that storytelling ebook. It contains some of the same information that John was talking about today. And along with getting a link to that storytelling ebook, you'll have access to all of our library of resources that cover topics ranging from how to build a better board for your nonprofit to how to choose a corporate partner. So welcome all of you to our library of great resources.
Thanks, Joanna. And you guys, seriously, she's not kidding. That library is really impressive. As a matter of fact, one personal favorite that they publish every year. I love when the benchmark report, the state of peer-to-peer fundraising, comes out each year. So that's a definite great guide. So we have some questions, and thank you, Joanna. John, if you're rehydrated yet, the questions are rolling in. Let me see. And I also collected a couple that were asked during the event. So you guys, I know we're coming up on the top of the hour, but we're going to hang in here for another 10 minutes maybe and get to as many questions as we can. So, John, the question came in earlier. It says, and you may have covered this, but I'd love to hear your answer anyway. I work for a multifaceted organization that focuses on job skills training in several locations throughout the state. And Otis has something to say. You would think that we would have tons of content, but after the new year until June, there's very little happening within the organization. How can you plan an editorial calendar around a drought of stories without regurgitating the same message for 6 months? So essentially, you know, they have a busy period, they have a dry season. What tips do you have for planning out a content strategy given that?
Well, I would say the first question I have is really, you know, why not focus on what your supporters care about? So, you know, it sounds like this organization is telling stories based on themselves. Hey, look at us. It's our 100th anniversary. We have this event coming up. There's a lot of stuff, right? Rather, focus on things that are important to your audience. So actually, I work with a few schools. And one question, actually in education foundations and schools. So they have the same question. What do we do during the summertime when school's out? Well, parents are still being parents during the summertime. Why not really find out what is going to be useful to them during these down periods? So I would always focus on that. And that I think is really the solution, is to really focus on what do your people care about. And I think it's not like they stop caring once you stop once your season stops. They still want to hear stories. And I think that's so critical, because in order to keep people's attention and keep them interested, you really do have to stay top of mind. Social media is a very easy way to do that. So you can keep people interested with your newsletter, with your Facebook updates all throughout the year. But I would highly recommend them focusing more on, you know, what do our supporters really care about? How can we create value and be useful, really? How can we create utility for our supporters, like parents, during the summertime?
Yeah, I loved that specific tip, too, of looking at the questions that you're answering all the time. And to be fair, I believe that question probably came in right around the point where you were tackling this subject, and you've offered some great advice, so thank you. And if you haven't left Hadley, because I know that was your question, let me know if there's anything else, or reach out to John later with a question. And I also want to let you guys know that you will be getting a recorded version of this, and you can ask questions during the on-demand version if you're listening to this later as well. John, here's a question about repurposing your story in 3 places, for example. What tips can you give, you know, ways to, can we just repost the same story in 3 places without customizing it for each channel, or are there specific advice you give about that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So actually, each platform has different limitations. So for example, limitations and characteristics, let's just say. So for example, on Twitter, you're limited, 140 characters, that's it. Okay, so you really have to think about crafting something that's short, right to the point. I always think about a blog, kind of a newspaper headline. That's really what Twitter is good for. Facebook, of course, you can post longer stuff. It's always good to be shorter. As a general rule, shorter is better. But the one thing hands down that works on all the platforms are pictures, especially Instagram. Now, Instagram is primarily pictures. You can't post a link on Instagram. It's got to be a picture. Also, Instagram, it performs really well with hashtags. So I always recommend to my clients, you know, include at least 5 to 7 hashtags on your Instagram posts. Diabetes awareness, and so forth, just to create more awareness around that post. You know, when people click on those hashtags, you get more visibility that way. So each, you know, the story will remain the same, and this is the purpose of the content calendar, so that yes, we will publish these stories at the same time, maybe not the same minute, but certainly during the same week or day or two. But think about what's the best way to optimize the story for Instagram? For Facebook, what's the best way for Facebook? So for example, let's say you do have a blog post on your website and you have a beautiful picture in there. When you add it to Instagram, add a few filters to it, put some hashtags on it. When you put it on Facebook, you're not going to post the picture, you're going to post a link to that blog post, and the picture, of course, will render in that link in how you post it. Later, of course, you're just going to link back to that blog post. And you can experiment with these things, but keep in mind the culture as well of each platform. So for example, if you just, and this is the problem with tools like Hootsuite. Hootsuite's great, but it's the use of Hootsuite that becomes problematic. People say, oh, great, technology is so wonderful. I can just write this one thing, check off all these 5 social networks and hit publish. But now we have an update on Facebook that says, please retweet, right? So that's a problem, right? So you have to think about the culture and the limitations, constraints of each network. But yes, the same story.
Yeah. Okay, so you can only automate so much. Some of it you have to customize, but your point of planning it ahead is really helpful and being able to utilize some of those tools. And speaking of different tools that you mentioned, a question came up, Norman, hi Norman. Norman says that this is the first time. I know he is. I know.
Norman's great.
That's why he deserves a special welcome. Hi, Norman. So he said he's just hearing about Pablo. Right now it looks like created by Buffer. Anything it offers that Canva doesn't. And I'm a huge Canva fan, so I'm interested in hearing about this as well.
I would say that Pablo is it's more limited than Canva. Canva's a lot more flexible, has a lot more features. So Pablo is it's kind of like a dumbed down Canva that's free. It's good. It's a really great tool. And if you're a fan of Buffer, Buffer produces Pablo. But if you're using Canva already, I would say you don't need Pablo if you're using Canva.
So you've provided us with a long list of tools. For those of you watching this now or on demand, you can look in the Q&A. If you click the Q&A widget, whenever possible, we've included some of the links of items that were brought up, including the great link about Google Analytics that you shared early on. And also, I want to turn your attention to the widget that looks like a green box with a white sheet of paper. It may or may not be open on your dashboard, but that's the resource list. So in that resource list, you're going to find a link to the storytelling ebook, so you can download that and have access to the library that Joanna told us about. And also included there are links for the other 2 events tied to this one. So there was so in 2 weeks on May 11th, John will be back and he will present on email marketing. There's a link there for you to register, and then there's also a link to register to view the on-demand version of the recorded event we had a couple of weeks ago that was on Facebook marketing, again, led by John and sponsored by DonorDrive. So wanted to bring that to your attention. Unfortunately, though, we have come to the end of our time today, so I just wanted to, I'd love to wrap up by thanking everybody, all the great questions and comments throughout, and the great attendance. We're really thrilled to have you all. Again, if you think of a question later, you can submit it later. We'll receive it and I'll forward it to the appropriate person, John or Joanna. And as a reminder, you're all going to receive an email today with the recording. That'll be a little bit later. And again, you can sign up for the other events. And thank you much thanks for the applause, the virtual applause. Thank you very much. Thanks, John, for the expertise. And Joanna and DonorDrive, thank you so much for being a wonderful supporter and sponsor and making this learning event possible. And thanks to all of you out there who are doing great things every day. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon, and hope to see you again. Bye-bye.